What if the thing you fear most isn't failure, but visibility? What if the real terror isn't falling short, but being fully seen? Not by the world, but by yourself. Most people believe they're afraid of not becoming enough, but in truth, they're terrified of becoming too much, too bold, too boundaried, too honest. There's a quiet panic that arises when we imagine stepping into our real power, because deep down, we know it would demand the death of the persona that kept us safe for so long. Carl Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and yet this is exactly what the soul demands when you feel that inner tug toward change. The person you avoid, the one with the clear voice, firm boundaries, and unshakable sense of self, is not your enemy. That version of you is not a stranger. It is your exiled potential. It is the radiant form of you that never got permission to live. We begin this journey by naming this paradox. The part of you that longs to rise is also the part you've spent years keeping buried. You fear success because it would confront you with the truth of who you are, unmasked, unfiltered, and unmistakably you. And while your ego may shrink from that exposure, your deeper self aches for it. It is the call to individuation, the sacred process Jung spoke of, where the false shell of the persona cracks and something more authentic emerges from beneath. You're not here to perform. You're here to remember, to retrieve the self you betrayed in small daily choices, the laugh you muted, the truth you swallowed, the needs you ignored just to stay acceptable. This isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about reclaiming what's been hidden. Throughout this journey, you'll learn that the you fear becoming is actually your greatest ally. That fear is not a stop sign. It is a signal, a summons, a sacred threshold. And if you're willing to walk through it, you may just meet the version of yourself that no longer needs to hide. So the question is not, what if I fail? The real question is, what if I finally become who I was always meant to be? What if the mask you wear to belong is the very thing keeping you from becoming? We all wear masks, polite, agreeable, socially acceptable versions of ourselves that help us move through a world addicted to appearances. You say yes when your body begs for rest. You smile through discomfort to avoid confrontation. You tone yourself down so others feel comfortable around you. At first, it feels harmless, kind, even strategic, but over time, something inside you starts to ache. You begin to sense the quiet betrayal of your own truth, the exhaustion of constantly managing how you're seen rather than living who you are. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the layer of identity crafted to protect us from rejection and judgment. The persona has its purpose. It allows us to adapt, to function in society, to earn trust. But when we mistake it for the whole truth of who we are, it becomes a cage. The more we depend on it, the smaller we become inside it. Our authentic impulses get edited out, replaced by rehearsed expressions and polite phrases. We live in fragments, applauded for the very traits that keep us unseen. Think about how often you trade your peace for approval. At work, you say yes to projects that drain you because you fear being seen as lazy. In love, you accept behaviors that unsettle your soul because you fear being alone. Even in friendships, you shrink your voice to avoid being too much. Over the years, these micro-compromises have become a silent erosion of self. You wake up one day, realizing you've built a life around who you thought you should be, not who you truly are. And yet, the moment you start to remove the mask, fear arises. Who will I be without it? Will people still love me? Will I even recognize myself? These are not small questions. They are the questions of awakening. Jung believed that the journey toward the self requires passing through this uncomfortable threshold, where the mask cracks and the raw face beneath begins to breathe again. But here's the paradox. The mask is both your shield and your limitation. It once protected you from harm, but now it keeps you from expansion. You can thank it for keeping you safe and still decide it no longer serves you. The truth is, the world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your presence. It needs the version of you that speaks with conviction, that honors rest without guilt, that knows when to say no and when to shine without apology. So ask yourself, if the mask stays on for another year, what will it cost? Not just in energy, but in missed opportunities, unlived moments, unspoken truths. The longer you wear it, the heavier it becomes. Maybe it's time to loosen its hold, even for a day, to say one honest thing you've never said before, to let silence replace forced smiles, to take the first breath as the real you. Because the moment you stop performing, life starts responding. And that's when you realize the mask didn't make you safe. It only made you small. What if the very thing you envy in others is a hidden part of yourself asking to be reclaimed? We tend to view envy as a flaw, something shameful that reveals our lack. But from the lens of Jungian psychology, envy is not an enemy. It is a flashlight, a glowing arrow pointing not to what you are missing, but to what you have disowned, the talents, traits, and truths that once lived in you freely, but were buried to survive in a world that didn't approve of them. When you feel that twinge of jealousy toward someone who speaks boldly, lives freely, or loves openly, it is often because that part of you was silenced, shamed, or split off long ago. Carl Jung called this the shadow, not just the dark or bad parts of us, but any trait we have repressed, rejected, or forgotten in order to be accepted. And envy is one of the surest ways the shadow speaks, not with words, but with emotional spikes. You see someone thriving in a way that unsettles you, and instead of celebrating them, something tightens inside. It may sound like judgment, but underneath that judgment is longing, a longing to express what they're expressing, to reclaim what they're embodying. For example, a woman who envies another's confidence in a boardroom may be staring directly at the assertiveness she was taught to suppress in childhood. A man irritated by someone's emotional openness may secretly long to cry without shame. A person who mocks creativity may have once been an artist whose talent was ridiculed into silence. These aren't just emotional reactions, they are psychic invitations. Jung teaches us that projection is how the unconscious tries to integrate. When you project disapproval outward, you are unconsciously trying to retrieve what you once banished inward. But here's the key. The moment you see your projection, you can reclaim it. Envy then becomes a bridge, a living map back to your authenticity. So next time you feel triggered by someone's light, ask, what am I seeing in them that I secretly want to express in myself? What quality, if I embodied it even just a little more, would feel like coming home? Reframe the story. Instead of, I can't stand that she's so confident, try, I want to feel safe enough to be that confident too. Instead of, he's so self-centered, try, I wish I could prioritize myself like that without guilt. This shift transforms envy into curriculum. Now you're learning from what once wounded you. Let yourself be guided by your emotional reactions rather than ruled by them. Let envy become a mirror, not a wall, because what you admire in others is often what your soul is aching to awaken in you. And once you begin to reclaim it, even in small ways, You start to walk differently in the world. You speak from a place that doesn't need applause. You move with a quiet certainty that no longer asks for permission. You become someone you once only envied, not by copying them, but by remembering yourself. So tell me, who do you envy, and what might that envy be trying to teach you about who you truly are? What if your healing didn't require a full plan, but just one brave act within the next 24 hours? Most people wait. They wait until the timing feels right, until they feel more confident, until life stops being so complicated. But what they're really waiting for is safety. The problem is, emotional transformation rarely feels safe. It feels raw, uncertain, and exposing. Insight will come like lightning. You'll have a powerful realization, a clear yes in your body, a flash of truth. But if you don't act on it quickly, it fades. And in that space of hesitation, the old patterns slip back in. The mask tightens, the shadow retreats, the self loses its moment of emergence. Carl Jung warned that knowing is not enough. Insight without movement becomes self-betrayal. It turns your truth into torment, because once you've seen what needs to change, staying the same becomes a form of quiet suffering. You'll start to doubt your clarity. You'll begin to question the voice inside, and over time, that doubt turns into emotional paralysis. You feel stuck, not because you don't know what to do, but because you didn't move when you did know. That's why I call this the 24-hour rule. When you hear your truth, act on it within a day. Not a leap, not a grand gesture, just one small, courageous move that aligns you with who you are becoming. Let's say you're in a meeting and your instinct says, "Speak up." The act could be just one sentence. If you feel emotionally drained by a relationship, your move might be to pause before replying and choose a boundary over a pattern. If your soul longs to be seen, maybe you write the post you've been hiding in drafts and let it breathe in public. You're not seeking perfection. You're choosing motion. Make it doable. Prepare the sentence. Choose a time. Tell one witness who will hold you accountable. Safety is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of structure. Even a courageous act becomes easier when it's designed into your day. Remember, the self doesn't grow through theory. It grows through alignment. Every small, brave act tells your nervous system, we can live without the mask. Every time you follow the inner yes, you create a new pathway, neural, emotional, spiritual, that leads you out of contraction and into life. So, what truth have you been postponing? What one brave thing could you do before the sun sets that would tell your soul, I'm listening now? That one step could be the doorway to a future version of you who no longer needs to fantasize about freedom, because they're finally living it. What if the very thing that frustrates you in others is the secret doorway to your own evolution? Most people point outward. She's so arrogant. He's so needy. They're so selfish. It feels natural to label and criticize, especially when someone triggers discomfort in us. But Jung asked a deeper question. What if those judgments are not reflections of them, but projections of us? What if you're not seeing them clearly at all, but only the parts of yourself you haven't fully claimed? This is the uncomfortable brilliance of projection. It is the mind's way of outsourcing the shadow, casting it onto others so you don't have to own it within. You condemn arrogance because you were taught to fear your own confidence. You resent neediness because your inner child was never allowed to express it. You recoil from selfishness because you've been trapped in martyrdom for years. But here's the breakthrough. Projection is not a flaw. It is a flashlight. It illuminates what you're finally ready to reclaim. Try this simple but powerful exercise. Write down 3 traits you strongly dislike or judge in others. Then ask, in what healthy proportion might I benefit from embodying this trait myself? For example, I hate how controlling she is becomes I'm ready to reclaim my ability to lead decisively when needed. Or he always makes it about him becomes I'm ready to stop shrinking and allow space to speak my truth. It's not about becoming what you hate. It's about realizing you've overcorrected so far in the opposite direction that the trait now appears toxic to you, when in reality, it's just been repressed. This isn't about moralizing, it's about integrating. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to befriend it, to give it a role that supports your growth. When you do this, something shifts. You react less. You listen more. You reclaim energy that was once wasted in emotional resistance and start investing it in actual transformation. Let's ground this in life. Think of someone at work who constantly annoys you. Instead of venting, ask, what part of me is being reflected back? Maybe they trigger your forgotten ambition, or expose your fear of visibility, or mirror your tendency to overcompensate. If you dig deep, you'll find that your strongest judgments often sit atop your deepest longings, and when you stop blaming others for traits you secretly need, a strange kind of peace enters. You no longer feel threatened by their expression. You don't need to fix them or avoid them. You become free to observe without absorbing, to respond without defending, to lead with awareness instead of reaction. So, what if the people who bother you most are not obstacles, but invitations? What if they're here to mirror back the exact fragments of your potential you've buried under years of politeness and people-pleasing? The mirror will not lie, but once you learn how to read, it will also never leave you powerless again. What happens when you finally bring your inner work into the outer world and the world responds? It is one thing to do the work of healing in the privacy of your mind or the safety of your journal, but real transformation crystallizes not in silence, but in the crucible of your daily life. Carl Jung taught that true integration requires reality as its mirror. So ask yourself, where does your growth get tested? The answer always returns to 3 sacred spaces: work, love, and solitude. Let's begin with work. Not the hustle, but the invisible contracts you've signed without knowing it. Have you agreed to be endlessly available, always agreeable, forever accommodating? For many people over 35, the pattern looks like this. You answer emails at midnight, say yes to every extra task, and justify burnout as proof of responsibility. But what if the opposite is true? What if your inability to set boundaries is not a strength, but a wound, one that secretly sabotages your value? Try this. Set one boundary in your work life this week. A simple one. No meetings after 6 p.m. or no Slack messages on Sundays. Then track what happens. You might fear rejection or backlash, but what often surfaces instead is respect. When you stand behind your contributions and protect your energy, people adjust. Reality adjusts. And more importantly, you begin to trust your own word. You start seeing that boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to clarity and self-worth. Now turn toward love, romantic, familial, or even deep friendship. Where do you abandon your needs in the name of harmony? Where do you silence yourself to keep the peace? Many adults find themselves in relationships where conflict is either explosive or passive-aggressive. Jung would say that this is where the shadow runs wild because anything disowned becomes distorted. So let's bring clarity into the room. Create your own version of what therapists call fair fight rules. For example, no name-calling, no emotional withdrawal, no turning your partner into your parent. And most importantly, speak your needs without apologizing. "I feel disconnected when we don't talk at the end of the day" is not an accusation. It is a request for closeness. It is your inner truth wrapped in adult language. Watch how even the hardest dynamics shift when clarity replaces confusion. And then, solitude, the space no one sees but you live in every day. This is where the most sacred work happens, without performance, without an audience. If you've spent your life wearing masks to survive, you need time each day where no mask is necessary. Block 30 minutes on your calendar for what I call the no mask hour. Breathe deeply, journal honestly, cry if needed. Let your body soften into itself. In this space, no one needs you to be productive, cheerful, or impressive. You are enough in your being. This triad, work, love, solitude, becomes your personal laboratory. Test your truth. Witness the results. Are you respected more when you say no? Are your relationships gentler when you name your needs? Does your nervous system calm down when you stop abandoning yourself in silence? Integration is not a theory. It is practice. And every time you show up differently in these three arenas, the world shows up differently for you. So ask yourself today, which arena is calling for your truth the loudest? And are you willing to listen before life makes the choice for you? What if the reason you still feel incomplete isn't because you're broken, but because you're still chasing the illusion of perfection? So many people spend their lives polishing masks instead of meeting themselves. They silence their rage because it's not spiritual, suppress their desires because it's not pure, or fake forgiveness because it's the right thing to do. But in doing so, they fragment. They deny the very parts of themselves that hold the key to wholeness, the parts that scream, that ache, that feel shame, jealousy, lust, fear, or grief, the parts that were never allowed into the light. Carl Jung didn't ask us to be perfect. He asked us to be whole. And wholeness is messy. It's sacred chaos. It's holding both your compassion and your boundary, both your love and your anger, both your longing and your dignity. It's not choosing between your light and shadow, but learning how to let them sit at the same table without destroying each other. You've come this far for a reason. You recognized the mask. You traced your envy back to its unmet longing. You paused when the pain surged, took a breath, and dared to stay. You stopped blaming the mirror and began asking, what part of me is crying out through this reflection? And maybe, just maybe, you tried the smallest act of all, living it, applying it. Not just reading the theory, but saying no for the first time, or walking away, or standing still in a moment you used to run from. And now you arrive here. At the final paradox, the self you fear becoming is often the self that will finally set you free. You fear becoming selfish, but maybe you've never allowed yourself to exist without performing. You fear becoming too much, but maybe you've always been starving to feel fully. You fear being alone, but maybe you've never actually been with yourself long enough to meet who you are. You fear being judged, but maybe you're still seeing yourself through the eyes of someone who couldn't love your totality. Wholeness is radical. It breaks every rule you were taught to follow. It asks you to disappoint others before you abandon yourself, to stop asking for permission before you reclaim your truth, and to stop waiting to be fully healed before you begin living. So today, don't aim to be better. Aim to be real, complete, integrated. Let the fear of being imperfect fall away like an old skin. You are not here to be a statue. You are here to be a flame. Now speak this truth aloud and begin. The self I fear is the self that no longer asks to be liked. Today, I will stop apologizing for existing, because becoming who you're afraid to be is simply becoming who you already are, without the apology. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.